Okay, we're live.
Well, good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Let us begin by acknowledging that we are gathered together in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Today, we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties, with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. We are all treaty people. And before I call this meeting of council to order, I wish to offer deepest condolences to the families, friends, and neighbors who are grieving the devastating losses of life on the Long Hill Road. There are no words to describe the sadness and shock felt by our community regarding this matter of intimate partner violence. When such incidents take place, victims of IPV and their supporters are often re-traumatized. So be kind and respectful to one another. So many are hurting in our community. So I will now call this meeting of January 14th to order. And I welcome those who come and are in the gallery. We have early risers in the hallway. It's great to see you today. And welcome those of you who are watching from YouTube at home on your own computers. So I'll move on to take an approval of the agenda or any additions or omissions. Under Councilor Wilson.
Move to approve the agenda as circulated.
I will second the motion with the proviso that we have an addition of a notice of motion in under new business.
That would be 9.1. And Councilor Feeney.
Mayor, I'd also like to include the motions associated with the community in bloom.
Yes.
Approvals that we provided notice of in the December 10th meeting.
Okay, noted.
It should be 7.3.
That should be 7.3. Thank you for that. Any other additions? Before we had a motion made in a second, all those in favor, signify by aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to the minutes. Are there any errors or omissions? So I will make a motion for approval of the minutes. Deputy Mayor and second by Councilor Carr. Thank you. Okay, we have public input session next. Do we have? Okay, Tammy Turner, you'd like to come? Welcome.
Thank you.
State your name and your civic address.
My name is Tammy Turner and my husband Tom and I live at 228 Hawthorne Road. I'm speaking to the short-term rental regulation report written by Deputy CAO Eric Levy that is part of your agenda this morning. Firstly, we appreciate that this report was completed as a result of a motion made by Councillor Feeney in October 2024. We also appreciate that this report has been made public. I would like to clarify that my husband and I were not confused by the bylaw as the report states, and I quote from the report. Recently, correspondence received from residents, in particular from Tammy and Tom Turner of Hawthorne Road, have highlighted concerns and confusion around the regulations as referenced at the October 8th council meeting. We understood the short-term rental bylaw as it is written and its relevance to the Airbnb business that was being operated in our neighborhood. Before it had been reported to the bylaw officer, we knew that there had been no permit issued. Having checked, we knew that it was not the primary owner's residence, as they had never lived in the home and their primary residence was elsewhere in the province, which was easily proved, and this information had been passed on to the bylaw officer. And while the report states the town has no jurisdiction over Airbnb or other listing sites or contact with them to ensure their listings are accurate, it was very clear that there was a direct correspondence with the listings of this short-term rental on the Airbnb site through pictures, active dates, and their corresponding active and ongoing reviews. It is accurate to state that my husband and I were concerned about the duration of time it took for an investigation of this illegal short-term rental, despite there being various proof of its operation and the enforcement of this bylaw, and we remain concerned. The illegal Airbnb was permitted to operate for a total of 3 months in our neighborhood, the time in which it was reported and when it finally ceased being an Airbnb. The final month of its operation, it was permitted to operate because the bylaw officer made a deal with the Airbnb operators in order to gain compliance. This was our concern, and it remains our concern. How effective is a bylaw if it requires a deal to be made with people who are operating an illegal business in order for compliance to be achieved? To clarify, we were told by the bylaw officer that in order to avoid legal action, a deal had been made. We would ask council to carefully reflect upon this report, to consider how timely investigation can be achieved and enforcement can be improved. Thank you.
Are there any other public? No, okay, seeing none. We will move on to presentations. I'll ask Ashley Nunn Smith to come and do her presentation. Welcome Tammy from the Social Public Libraries, soft spot in my life. And I offer time for you and we'll give you information to get moving.
Thank you. Just loading up the presentation here.
Okay.
All right, there we go. My name is Ashley Nunn Smith. I'm the CEO and Chief Librarian with South Shore Public Libraries. I just wanted to highlight some of the recent activity of the library and welcome the new and returning counselors around the table. All right, let's
Maybe
see.
we could move one of the screens so that we can see from here and then the gallery people
Gallery
can
can
see
see
there.
There we go. All right. So our libraries have something for everyone. I have some photos from here in Mahone Bay. Halloween last year happened to be a Thursday, so we were here in Mahone Bay, and I have a 1-year-old who's a little too young for trick-or-treating and a 13-year-old who thinks he's too old. And so our one stop was the bookmobile, and the staff were giving out candy and we're in costume, and it was really fun for everyone. It was a great community feeling this Halloween. So to start off, there are 9 regional libraries in Nova Scotia. We're in the turquoise there on the South Shore, and this is the average weekly open hours per location. So across our 4 locations in Bookmobile, we had an average of 33.9 open hours this past fiscal year. And we are very nearly tied for 3rd place for in-person visits per capita at 2.6 per year. In terms of a branch comparison, our Bookmobile visits and circulation compete with our smaller branches. The busiest location by far is in Bridgewater. Just to highlight some of the different services that we offer, of course, our free access to board games, picture books, and other toys and games encourage family literacy. Numerous studies show that reading together as a family is still the best way to set kids up for success in school and beyond. As well, the programs and crafts and imaginative play that our branches offer, puppet theaters, play kitchens, and so on, encourage a love of narrative and a lifelong association with self-directed learning. Our program attendance has recovered from the pandemic and the lockdowns. We offered over 2,000 programs last year with 13,000 attendees. As well, the study and workspace that our branch locations offer, and our Bookmobile has Wi-Fi as well, and 7 power outlets. So if your power is out at home, you can come and charge your devices at the branch or on the Bookmobile. A lot of folks rely on that Wi-Fi and the computer access to bridge that digital divide, keep costs low. There's no cost of entry. You don't need to buy a coffee every 20 minutes to be allowed to stay. So we do have folks who come in the morning and stay and work or study all day. In terms of in-person visits, we average over 18 folks visiting our locations every hour, and that puts us in 4th place in the province. We need to keep that 2 in-person visits for Eastern counties in mind when we get to the full-time equivalent staff, because they have the same number of staff as we do, and yet we're much, much busier. Our Same Page catalog is 3 years old this month. It's a shared catalog of the 8 regional library systems, Halifax being the only exception. There's access to over 1 million items to borrow. And since its launch, the amount of items shipped between the branches has increased by nearly 13 times more material. Pre-COVID, the 5-year average was about 37,000 outgoing items being shipped between the branches. Now that it's all one shared catalog, in 2023, we shipped more than 1 million items. And that's with the same level of staff. So there's a big increase in the risk of repetitive strain injury for packing up all those items into mailer bags and going between Canada Post. Of course, during the strike, there was a disruption there, but it's been a very successful program, and we're kind of victims of our own success there in terms of keeping up with the volume. Our physical and digital borrowing have both much not only recovered, but grown since before the pandemic. So the last year before COVID and curbside pickup, we circulated 251,000 digital items or physical items, sorry. And this past year, we did almost 100,000 more, 348,000. So again, that volume with the same staffing level. And 55,000 digital items this past year, which does come with a staff component as well, as folks will bring in their tablets and need help, and their iPhone and help with the app and downloading and figuring out, resetting their password and all that tech help as well that our staff help with. Our Bookmobile, our new vehicle, was launched in 2021. We have 18 regular stops. The circulation remains very high, as do the visits. Of course, keeping a vehicle on the road, we all know from our personal vehicles, is expensive, but it's lower than operating the number of branches it would take to reach all of those communities. And Mahone Bay on Thursdays is the single busiest stop. As well, other services that we offer, we've distributed more than 2 million rapid tests for free since 2021. We help folks book vaccine appointments and do virtual care through the Maple app, all kinds of other services as well. In terms of our spending, the library formula is roughly 70% provincial funded, 27% municipal, and about 3% self-generated through donations and fundraising. In the past fiscal year, the Sauti Shore Public Libraries had expenses of $30.64 per resident. That puts us at the low end of that chart. But on the other hand, our collection spending, it was in first place at almost $7 per resident on the collection. So we do that by keeping admin and equipment costs low and putting more of that money back into keeping the collection up to date. And I think the results of doing that are positive. We're in 3rd place for annual borrowing per capita, with every resident, on average borrowing about 6 items a year. Just some highlights from this year. One of our longest standing Bookmobile patron turned 100. That's Crystal Medill, our Bookmobile coordinator, at her birthday celebration for Reverend Barbara Minard. And she walks to the Bookmobile every week and is one of the very few who has been on every one of our models of Bookmobile, including the current one. So a wonderful celebration just last week. Pride programming was our biggest year yet. We had the Bookmobile in the Pride Parade in Bridgewater. We had Reading with Royalty at 3 branches, Lunenburg, and the first ever in Queens County at our Liverpool branch. We had a Truth and Reconciliation event at our Bridgewater branch. More than 80 attended. We unveiled our new Pajealousy maps by local artist Jessica Jerome. It features traditional place names of our branches and Bookmobile stops. We showed a short film, McGee's Doll, and led the children in making rag dolls. And I won't read the whole quote, but there was a shared to our social media, a parent of a 4-year-old who slept with her doll that night. So very touching moment. We had a grant from the provincial government on food literacy. So we offered all our programs are free, but we offered free programs, cooking demonstrations, really low barrier, like basic stuff. The bottom 2 photos are from the new gourmet chef, Simon Francis, who is the Bannock champion of Canada. And he led us in making tea biscuits, and then we made strawberry shortcake. Lunenburg Lit Fest, the 9th annual, was this past November, and so that brings international bestselling and local authors together with intimate settings. So small audiences really get to have meaningful engagement, questions and answers with the author. Oops. We did a marketing audit this year through a grant. Shortstop Marketing did a survey and interviews, and there was overwhelming positive sentiment, particularly in the areas of the bookmobile, our helpful staff, and the sense of community that people feel when they come into our spaces. And the requests were for more hours, more quiet space, more seating, more programs, of course, more help with technology and health and social service supports. So what's next? That's where we are. The library funding formula is governed by the Libraries Act. There was no formula in place for about 17 years. There were small and sporadic increases, and then for 10 years, there were no increases. In 2021, there was a new formula put in place that was consistent, stayed the same for 5 years. And of course, these past 5 years, there was record high inflation and cost of living. So we were doing the same. And as you saw from the charts, expected to do more and more and more. With the same amount of money, and because of inflation, actually technically less money. So this past spring and summer, the Library Funding Review Committee with representatives from municipalities and library boards met, I think, 6 times, and their recommendations are currently before the government. This is the chart I was telling you about. Our full-time staff equivalent is 17 staff. We actually are 34, a mix of full and part-time staff. And there's Eastern counties with roughly the same number as ours. And I want you to keep Colchester East Hants in mind as well with their 30.9. Because when you look at our metrics, we do Eastern counties is about 20% of our visits, our circulation, and our program attendance, and we're actually more on par with Colchester East Hants. So our staff are doing a lot more with less hours. This is a different way of looking at that. Each of our staff persons serves an average of 3,698 residents, and they also check out on average over 20,000 physical items a year. So that's twice as many as the Colchester or Halifax staff are doing. And so that's, again, a lot of physical volume that all needs to be checked out. We do have self-check machines, but they only do about 20%. People still like that personal touch of talking to a person, and that all needs to be checked back in when it comes back in and put back on the shelf. So that's a lot of work. And in terms of salaries, this was part of that library funding review. The group contacted Essential HR to do this independent comparison, and they looked at the hourly wage in the rest of Canada for public library staff, and then the hourly wage in Nova Scotia. This is the 75th percentile numbers, because of course salaries are often in a range and vary from organization to organization. The gap widens as you move up through librarian, supervisor, and so on. And then another way to look at it is comparison between, Service Nova Scotia clerks, academic libraries, the community college technicians, and you can see, again, quite a difference in the salaries. So in conclusion, Shore Public Libraries, we continue to serve as the heart of a community. We celebrate reading, discovery, learning, and sharing. Our level of public trust is very high. Our survey found that out in resounding numbers. Our circulation, in-person visits, and program attendance continue to rise year over year. So we're doing more and more. I'll send out the link. There's a survey that's called Overdue, the case for Nova Scotia Public Libraries. It was done by the Canadian Urban Institute. It's an 80-page report, very, very comprehensive. And it showed, again, this has been shown before, but that every dollar invested in public libraries translates to $6 in health, wellness, economic, social capital. Someone comes in and gets help with a resume, and then they end up getting a job, or kids come in and read to a lab, and they improve, like a dog, and they improve their reading capability. So the public expects our services to continue to grow. More and more people are moving to the area. They're sometimes moving from larger urban centers, and they expect more services of their public library. More staff would mean more technology help, more programs, just, again, that more that people are asking for. Our turnover is quite high, as staff are reporting that they can no longer afford to work at the public library, and the funding formula is currently before government. I don't have any news on when we will hear back from them. And we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. Councilor Wilson.
Yeah, I've been kind of a proponent of having a bricks and mortar library in Mahone Bay since I joined council back in the dark ages. I have never gotten any particular traction with council, then or now.
Mhm.
And I've never gotten anything from the board either because they contended it cast a come from the past. Would you mind taking a minute or two to just talk about the additional services that are available if you have a physical library compared to
Sure.
the bus?
Yep, absolutely. So of course, there's more space. So you can come in and you can sit at a comfy chair, you can work for the day, you can have a computer terminal if you don't have one yourself. Programs, although I think there is an opportunity to partner with an existing organization, maybe the Mahone Bay Center, to offer programs, to have library staff come and offer programs in Mahone Bay without a dedicated library space. And of course, more open hours. I will say that part of the ways we're able to accomplish some of the things that we accomplish is because we concentrate our resources. And so I'll just go back a few slides here to any of the ones with the map. You see the Annapolis Valley, for example, they have 12 branches and it's spread across geographically. Some of them are quite close together. Pictou and Ganesh as well. Some of the library branches are 10 minutes from each other. And a lot of those branches are what we call one-person libraries, which is just what it sounds like. There's one person who works there. So that person is basically just doing the core services. They're not able to offer any programs because they're by themselves. And so I do agree that Mahone Bay is, I was actually asked this question the last time I presented here, but I was new to the Saussure libraries, and it is the only town in Nova Scotia without a branch. And so I've been with Saussure Public Libraries for 3 years now. And when I meet people, especially if they say they live in Mahone Bay, I say, oh, let me ask you, do you use the library? And if they say yes or no, I ask like why or why not. And so far, geographic proximity has not been a reason. So I know folks come to programs in Bridgewater. I've seen them and said, oh, where are you from? And they're from Mahone Bay, and Lunenburg Library is quite close. And so I am sure they exist and I haven't met them yet. I'm not saying I talked to everyone in Mahone Bay. But I do think that I did talk to a resident once a few years ago, and I think that this is true. Even if we were gifted a fully ready to open library branch here in town with books on the shelves and computers on the tables, we would not have the operational funds to operate it. So every hour that we would open in that branch would have to come from closing an hour somewhere else. I can tell you that with certainty. Every year that I've been here, we look at our budget and we find our staff wages by cutting somewhere else. That's just the reality. Okay, well, you know, this desktop computer is verging on 10 years old, but we'll keep it a little bit longer because we'll stretch our technology replacement schedule. And so I can tell you that we would not be able to open here without closing somewhere else. And so that is a question to investigate. Is it worth reducing the hours somewhere else to open here? I'm not sure, but that is something to look at. So that's a mixed answer. It's not a clear answer. I do think that the bookmobile is a wonderful way to get the library out to folks who perhaps don't have a vehicle and who walk. So if you were a walker who lived here in town, of course, you're not going to, you could use Lunenburg County Wheels or something to come to Lunenburg or Bridgewater, but this is a way to bring the library to you. So if you have any more specific questions, I could either answer or refine the answer, but that's generally how I feel about having lots of branches relatively close to each other.
Thank you, Carmen.
That's so interesting. And in relation to Councillor Wilson's question, does the library use volunteers?
We do. We have lots of volunteers. Actually, most of the books put back on the shelf in Bridgewater are by our volunteers because our staff are just flat out busy helping you saw that chart of the in-person visits, just busy helping all of the people who come and visit. We do have volunteers in other locations. It is tricky in my experience to fully staff a library by volunteers. In that brand survey that we did, it's the knowledgeable, trained staff that people come in and are expecting. And so volunteers are wonderful. Don't get me wrong. We really appreciate our volunteers, but it is tricky to offer the level of service that people expect with volunteers. I understand. I get it. I've been a volunteer in different organizations. It's hard to be as reliable as well. So We use volunteers in our Greenfield location, which is a single person library. And for safety, we don't want the staff person there alone, so we have them and a volunteer, and it's often that the volunteer gets busy and doesn't show, and that's fine. I get it, but it's tough to run a library by volunteers.
And then one more question. Thanks for that. And it's so impressive what you're accomplishing with limited resources.
Thank you.
I was just curious about when the library moved
Mhm.
and what effect there was on usage.
Which library?
Oh, in Bridgewater.
In Bridgewater, about 12 years ago.
It was 12 years ago.
Yes,
That's
yeah, it's been
long.
quite a while, yeah. I would say that at first, some folks, and the LCLC felt further away, I think 12 years ago. There's now a Bridgewater Transit stop that stops there. There's a sidewalk that goes all the way there. So I think at first it maybe felt further away than it does now. It has just, since then, since opening, has just gone up and up and up year over year, COVID aside. Being in the building with the LCLC, there's a lot of serendipitous discovery. You have one child skating or in a swimming lesson, and you bring your other child to the library. Or the coffee shop is really handy, being able to, if you are there all day, to grab a coffee and come back into the library. It's wonderful. So it's just going up and up since it opened. Yeah, it's a great spot. I presented to Bridgewater last night. It does need to be bigger. It's we have one program room and we could offer so much more, a mix of quiet study space. We dedicate that room during exam time, but then that means we can't run any programs. So having more programming space would be wonderful. Having a mix of noisy kids space and teen space and quiet study space would be lovely. So that's an issue to look in the future as well. As the survey showed, more space is much needed. It's not uncommon to not be able to find a seat because they're all taken. Yeah.
Councillor.
One brief question, thanks, Ashley. We have a major construction project that's gonna be starting in 3 or 4 months.
Mhm.
And it's right at the epicenter of town, exactly where the bookmobile is parked.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you and town staff are starting to think about a relocation for the bookmobile for safety and practicality
Sure.
for
Yeah.
the summer months.
Yeah, that's definitely something we can take offline and discuss. Yeah,
You don't
It's on-
technically know when the construction
It's
is.
on-
Yeah.
No point soon and we'll really
Yeah,
know too.
for sure.
We
Yeah.
wanna make sure your stats still,
Yes,
still keep
yeah,
cranking them.
yeah, and that it's safe for everyone who's
Put a
visiting.
big
Yeah,
sign down there, we'll come up with it.
relocated. Yeah,
Home base center.
Yeah. wonderful. Yeah.
I make sure Reverend Bernard can get there.
Yes, can get there. Yes, there are a lot of folks who walk and who at all of our locations. It's such a community feel too. We had some mechanical issues recently, and we actually staff took their own van, their minivan, loaded up the bins in the back, and drove to a few places. One with Caledonia on a Saturday, and not only did people come to pick up their things, but they stayed like a tailgate party. They were just chatting around the tailgate of this that person's van, and it's just so wonderful. It's such a community feel.
Well, thank you, Ashley.
Thank
That's
you.
great, thank you.
Always good to hear what's
Yeah,
happening
thank you.
at the public library.
Thank you.
We had one more presentation, and Andrew Tanner. Dwayne, we'll just stand.
Just me, you're stuck with me this morning.
To talk on the senior 55 plus provincial games. It's going to be in Bridgewater again.
It's gonna be in Lunenburg County,
Yeah.
Mayor.
Oh,
Lunenburg
okay.
County, yeah, we need to stress that. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me in to speak to this. So just get we'll get the slideshow going here in a second. It's always fun speaking on the other side of the table.
Just thinking that.
Well, that's all right. That's okay, I can,
Do you want to share
I-
yours?
or I can speak to it. You folks have got the
We also-
PowerPoint, yeah.
We can talk about it.
So no worries, I won't take much of your time. So the 55 plus games were awarded to the LCLC back in the spring. So the LCLC put in a bid for it and was successful. We last hosted it in 2017. It was highly successful then. It's since been to Pictou County, and last time it was in Yarmouth. It runs from September 21 to 25, September 21 to 25. It is throughout Lunenburg County, so we're using literally facilities as far away as New Germany. So we're using the Legion and the River View Commons, the Bend Commons area for biking and pool. We're using the Mahone Bay Center and tennis courts for different activities. We're using Sherwood Golf Course for your golf piece, and obviously Bridgewater for some swimming and other things. So it is it's a big event for Lunenburg County as a whole. It will bring in about 700 to 800 people during that time. So we intend to hit that number, if not surpass it. We've already had a fair amount of inquiries and so on. It includes everything from Scrabble to pool to hockey to tennis to golf, you name it. There are, I believe, 22 different events that are happening. So we've got a large volunteer contingent to help put this on. These folks, Mayor used the word seniors, don't consider themselves seniors. They're very active. The whole goal of the games is to encourage people to stay active during their whole life. So we have people literally that will come that are 90 plus, down to just cusping the 55-year-old. And I'm not there yet. Close. So we're quite excited about it. It brings about, we had an economic impact study done. It brings about $500,000 into the community during the end of September. So it's a very quick and impactful event. Obviously, Mahone Bay and Lunenburg specifically will benefit just because people want to, while they're here, tour around and see the historic places and the lovely little communities that we have. Bridgewater will be impacted directly as well, primarily because of hotel stays being in that vicinity. But Oak Island is being used, as well as a few, unfortunately, Airbnbs around as well. So
Hopefully not.
Legal.
Yes, yeah, sorry.
Fair enough.
So we're quite excited about it. The reason we're here primarily is to make sure that you're aware of it happening. We'll have more communications and so on happening. The organizations just literally started meeting in September. We meet sometimes twice a month, but typically monthly. Those meetings will become more frequent as we get closer to the games, obviously. So to make sure you're aware that this is happening in your community, obviously, and for those listening online and maybe in any newsletters you actually listed, sort of promoted as well, because one of the things we are changing for this year is to have more of a social engagement with these people. So in the past, there's been sort of an opening, closing ceremony, and that's kind of it. We're programming in much more parties, so to speak, various culinary events and so on and so forth. So we really take advantage of what the Lunenburg County has to offer, what the communities have to offer. We really want to leverage the 700 people coming in and make sure they have a great time. And then they obviously return as tourists going forward. So I think that is about it from me, unless you have any specific questions. I like keeping things very short and sweet and to the point. So yeah.
Can I ask a comment?
That's good.
Hi, thanks, Emery. What's going to be happening in Mahone Bay? Yeah.
So we're using the Mahone Bay Center for the gymnasium piece. So there's a bit of, I think it's volleyball, basketball, or something like that off the top of my head, as well as some games piece as well. And then we're using the tennis courts. Tennis is quite popular, so we're having to take advantage of all the tennis courts in the region for the most part. So yeah.
Pickleball?
Pickleball is so pickleball is a bit of a quandary for us because of the popularity. So we'll most likely use the gymnasium for some pickleball. Michelin has obviously been tagged, and then the gymnasium in Lunenburg as well through the town of Lunenburg. So yeah.
Councilors?
Is there anything you need from us other than the blessing?
Well, there will be a request coming to you for some financial contribution. It will be extremely minimal. The budget as a whole is about $250,000 budget. Now, this slide I think says about 185, but we're up to about $250,000. The town of Bridgewater and the municipality of the District of Lunenburg have each committed $10,000 in their previous budget, their current budget, and another $10,000 each, so $40,000 total in their upcoming budget. They're doing that obviously because they're going to reap most of the rewards. But I have to remind people that the town of Mahone Bay and the town of Lunenburg will certainly see the bulk of tourism folks as well. So we'll get a request filed, but it'll be minimal. We'll probably be asking for maybe $100 to $1,000 best case. So. Yeah.
That's
We are
it.
soon
Always,
going to-
yeah,
Tell me
yeah,
about that.
yes. Hence the timing of these presentations. Yeah.
Get your letter of request sooner or later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. Good.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, folks. Have a good day. See ya. Take care.
We are now going on to correspondences, item 5.1. Nova Scotia page Nova Scotia Association of Realtors. That was more.
Just gonna move that we receive and file that item. Mayor?
Okay, is there a second for that motion?
Second that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Ready for the question? All
Mhm.
those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. Our second item is correspondence from Lanier Hallway, damage to the 84 Main Street. Is there?
Well, maybe I can just quickly preface it, so, obviously, Public Works did acknowledge that there was some. Accidental direction of ice and snow of the property during snow clearing operations. They have been in contact with the property owner. Normally, this kind of thing would be handled at the administrative level, but it was requested with this letter be placed on council agenda. So I suppose my request would be that council not action this and staff write back as was requested in the correspondence. But happy to take any questions or direction.
I have a question, please. I didn't see any sort of request, like a financial request or an amount or just a repair. Is there an indication of what the financial impact was?
I could speak a little bit more to that in closed session, maybe.
All right.
Would be,
Thank you.
yeah.
Council Green?
Mayor, hearing that and knowing that staff is responding, you know, I think it's wise when citizens and people in the community want to have items entered into the public record. This is the appropriate mechanism to do that. So now that has happened, I do think at this point we should receive and file it as per our normal standard protocol. And I'm sure anything that comes out of it will be dealt with between staff, and if they need council to weigh in, we're happy to do that. So I move that we receive and file.
Second, okay. Any other discussion? Okay, ready for the questions? All those in favor, signify aye. Opposed, nays? The motion is carried. Thank you all. And we will move on to staff reports, item 6.1. Is there any discussion? Oh, Council Wilson,
Just move that we receive this request for information.
seconded,
I'll second that.
Deputy Mayor. Any discussion?
Just to comment, this is our new format through staff reporting. And it, two things I guess are significant. One is it's only the first section of what you used to receive on your monthly meetings. The remainder of those reports will be delivered on a quarterly basis because they don't actually change most meetings. And we wanted to principally focus on accessibility with this version. So this is a report that now meets guidelines for accessibility. It's properly text readable and with Excel formatted document we're using before. So in order to keep it relatively short, that's the plan, and hopefully it will be more accessible than the previous year.
And you still get the yellow highlight.
Yeah, well, it's been asked that we just highlight the parts where something is significant, to call your attention to it.
Great. All right, so we have one motion, I'm ready for the question. All those in favor? signify with aye. Opposed, nay? The motion is carried. Thank you. Region 6 budget report. Is there any special around this? Okay. Oh, Councilor
I
Kerr.
have a question, which is, the answer will help me and perhaps public as well. What is the relationship of Region 6 with NJSB, the Municipal Joint Services Board? Because they're both involved with waste. And what else?
Well,
Well, somebody give me a 25
I
word
I
explanation.
I asked that at my first meeting of the joint services, and they said this is provincially run. And it's run by the provincial government. And it is separate from the joint services. CAO,
Yeah, I can probably add a little bit to that. So the province is split up into a number of waste regions. So there's a requirement that each of those regions participate at a provincial level. So there's a regional chair, regional chairs, there are the regional chairs meetings, and that way the province is able to hear an aggregate of all of the various municipal waste collection entities that are working in the province. But ultimately, we are the members of MJSB, members of Region 6. We're also working together to actually provide the service. And so day to day, Region 6 we're represented at Region 6 through Municipal Joint Services Board as the provider of our waste service. So it's almost as if each of us had our own waste service, we'd have a manager of that service, and they would go and participate through Region 6. But because it's consolidated, effectively, MJSB is a member of Region 6. Of course, they're not technically a member, we're the members, and they're there representing us. So we do get a board seat, but also we expect anything of consequence to be handled by the staff at MJSB.
Also, just
Deputy Mayor.
just for the public, I believe it's also a question of sequence of events, right? So with MJSB and the facilities that we have nearby, there's a certain amount of triage, right, that happens with everything from compost to lumber and other things. And then the next step is really Region 6 in terms of, but some things don't go there, right? So it's also a sequence of events, isn't it?
Well, Region 6 is a coordinating body, so you're right that beyond MJSB, things get shipped off to be dealt with in other ways. And then the way that those things are dealt with, not the actual dealing with them, but the way in which they're dealt with is where Region 6 comes in.
Exactly, that's. what I
So
was
the
trying to
provincial
articulate.
diversion of recyclables and
Yeah.
most significantly the credits that come back based on the successful diversion of recyclables,
Right.
and those go through Region 6.
Right,
So that's the opinion. Yeah, there's no apparatus. Region 6 is a very lean organization.
It's certainly worthy of a communication piece because it's a fascinating sequence of events. I think we've got that on the list to highlight.
Who's discussing?
I don't know, I'm intrigued, just don't know why.
Okay,
All of a sudden, thank you for that.
okay. Any other discussion on Region 6? We will move on to post-election policy. Oh, short-term rental regulations and enforcement. So that's 6.3.
Do we need a motion? Do we need a motion to approve the budget?
Oh, okay, we're not doing a
Receive and file.
Okay.
I'll second that.
And second by the deputy.
Sorry, we actually were being requested to pass a motion, I think.
To approve the budget?
Yeah, to approve the budget,
Region 6.
of which our share is very small.
$1,496.92.
So normally we don't refer it to budget, we just pass it on the spot and actually incorporate it into our budget.
Council Wilson.
I'd like to move that we approve the budget of not related for the Region 6 and an amount as quoted by Ms. Golden.
I'll second it and withdraw the previous motion.
Councilor Garber, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now we will move on to short-term rental regulations and enforcement.
So I'll just quickly speak to this one. Essentially, as was already prefaced, this is provided the council in response to a motion passed last fall. Broadly outlining the structure of short-term rental regulations and enforcement in Mahone Bay. It is worth noting in there that there are some opportunities for further improvement of that program. It's also worth noting, it's not in the report, that we have seen a substantial reduction in the number of short-term rental offerings in the community that are being advertised. And ultimately, it remains to be seen how that translates into compliance, but I think, in general, that is what we're looking to see. So at this time, the extent to which we want to step up enforcement is obviously something to be discussed. There is a federal program out there that can provide financial support for additional short-term rental enforcement. Something we might want to consider, but I would suggest probably in concert with the larger housing approach that we're taking in the community. So, for example, if we're talking about the Housing Accelerator Fund application, there's some synergies between those two things. So just a note, happy to take any questions, but it doesn't, the report doesn't really focus on opportunities for improvement, but there are some that are highlighted and subject to council's discussion, probably on the larger subject of housing. We'll figure out where this fits in. We could certainly make additional investments in that area. Happy to take any questions. The report is just provided for information.
Any questions? Councillor Kaufman?
Yes, it's mentioned in the report that there is room for fines to be initiated to help the enforcement process. And then it moves on in the report to refer to provincial regulations where there are substantial fines. The town has bylaws, the province has regulations. I'm not sure whether the two come together.
Yeah, I can comment on that. So, I mean, at the end of the day, all summary offenses which are being established on the basis of either legislation at the provincial level or regulations or legislation or municipal bylaw have essentially the same weight. So if you're non-compliant with the strictures of the provincial legislation or regulation, they can create summary offenses, and those can then become issued as fines even by bylaw enforcement. Similarly, we can, and it's noted here how, create summary offenses in respect of our own bylaws. The land use bylaw doesn't typically have them. The difference is what the offenses are. So there's a lot of overlap, but essentially the province is not regulating some of the aspects that we're regulating. So the offenses that are created by our bylaw would differ from the offenses that you're able to issue a ticket for under provincial regulation. So while we do have access to that as a further means of pushing people into compliance, it's only to push them into compliance with the provincial regulation. Now, the best thing about the provincial regulation is it requires those operations to be permitted by the town. So that's our kind of hook. You're out of compliance with the province if you're operating without having been permitted by the town. Anything you need to do to get permitted by the town, that's something that isn't subject to a fine at the current time.
So have we had any interaction with the province on these non-compliance issues?
Yes, plenty of interaction with the province, but that still doesn't change the fact that the offenses that are ticketable are different from the offenses that are described in our own land use bylaw. And just to make that distinction, so somebody can still be issued a fine for non-compliance with the province, but that's different from what a fine might look like if it were non-compliance with our bylaw. Al can still issue those fines, and it is a tool in our toolbox.
So Al can issue which fines, not the provincial ones.
Yes,
They can.
summary
They
offense,
can.
my understanding, can be, yeah.
Okay.
Same as the RCMP can issue a summary offense ticket under our bylaw,
So the other
the ones with that.
question, if no one else, is the matter of bylaw enforcement in general. Not in this particular instance, but in general, it seems to be a problem. How now, not sure about things like ATVs. Is that traffic regulation or is it a bylaw that we say people cannot drive on roads?
Well, I think that's a topic for a different discussion.
It's part of the enforceability of bylaws, and
I think expectations in terms of bylaw enforcement are a really valid area for council to discuss, but I agree with the mayor. Our strategic planning and budget processes are upcoming, so those will be great opportunities to look at what the options are and what they could cost. Ultimately, most enforcement is reactive, which is stressed in this report. And to move from that reactive stance to a more proactive one in any particular area of enforcement will represent a big change in capacity. So that's something good to talk about budget time, so you can see how it relates to all the other priorities.
fair enough.
Councillor Freeman.
So it strikes me that given recent history, the market's smart and the market strategies will evolve. And so I think you know, where I see this dovetailing down the road is also our definition of what is not a long-term, a short-term rental, but quote unquote, a long-term rental. And is long-term rental equal 6 months plus a day or 3 months plus a day? Because it strikes me in situations where you have, you know, appreciating real estate values, people needing to get a rate of return on their investments, or their secondary houses. You know, you can work around this, all of these regulations by striking a 6 month plus a day lease. Which, you know, whether it's 6 months and a day, you know, and whether the people actually avail of the 6 months or they're, you know, so I think we objectively tried to craft a policy that would not only affect quality of, you know, improve quality of life for everybody, but also just make sure that housing was going to be made available for kind of more long-term use. But it does strike me that there are a few workaround and loopholes that will probably come back to council at a later date. Because I do think the market will find workarounds, and you know, we certainly saw that recently on Hawthorne Hill. And you know, maybe that problem is resolved now. That would be good news, but I know we don't have any policy right now around like what are the rules for what's a long-term rental. I'm assuming.
Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I think we do. I think it's 1 month plus a day.
1 month plus a day
Yeah.
is long-term.
Yeah, and I think that's relatively standard coming from the Residential Tenancies Act, because. You know, month-to-month leases are a pretty common construction for a long-term lease, even though they do remain month-to-month. So somebody may be in a month-to-month lease for decades, so it's hard to define that as short-term. I think we run up against
Well,
a larger provincial
Well, fair
definition.
enough. I didn't understand that. I thought I would have expected that the definition of long-term would have been more than 4 weeks. So essentially, to work around all of this report and all the nuance, all you need to do is find 12 customers who are willing to move in and out every 4 weeks, and you can rent away.
I mean, ultimately, yeah, the idea that municipalities would restrict the use of housing
No, fair.
stock to rental versus not rental
No, fair enough.
has never really been for our.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to, I'm just trying to understand, so we're all coming from a similar perspective on what is within our power to,
And I think
we're
you're
talking about
very
enforcement.
correct about the need to keep abreast of trends in terms of
Yeah.
effective enforcement. Like,
Yeah.
it is a new area. We've seen, I think, a big shift in terms of, as you noted, people who've invested in income property in Mahone Bay now having to shift out of that based on the bylaw change, and that takes a little bit of time.
Councillor Wilson, you have supplementary?
Well, just a comment really. It was very interesting to me to notice that in Europe, instead of the bylaws we had, which is limiting by time, what they've said in Europe, particularly in France and Italy, you cannot rent an Airbnb style accommodation without meeting the tenants personally and handing them the key. You can't use a lockbox anymore. So
Yeah.
that doesn't require you have to live in the building, but it requires you have to know the people and physically meet them, and that has changed the whole seascape.
Councillor Paulson?
My recollection is, and I don't know whether this is part of the registration process, but from an insurance point of view, anything less than a 1 year rental is commercial insurance, and that's hugely more expensive than residential insurance. Is that part of what's examined, part of the filing?
It's certainly nothing that I'm aware of. I mean, I think you would only get to that level of detail as an operator of rental housing. But it's an interesting note because as noted, there are plenty of month-to-month tenancies, and I doubt people are paying commercial insurance rates on those, but maybe they are.
Provincially, I know it was one of the considerations in plus GST, that you, if you were operating, you have GST. As well, that there are a lot of things that have been avoided, by operating your.
The problem is determining that for our purposes, they are considered residential from a taxation perspective for us. But I can't speak to like insurance costs or anything else. It might be a good incentive for people to focus on longer term rentals.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Sorry. Rebecca.
Councillor Fawnin.
I'm just wondering for the illegal Airbnb, were they fined?
No,
They weren't.
no, they were not.
Is that because they were like the first ones or
Well, so essentially the only fines that they could have been levied would have been under the provincial regulation, and that came in at such a time as they were coming into compliance right at the end of September. So had that been available at the beginning of the process, that might have changed the way that that process unfolded, and it probably would have led to quicker compliance. But ultimately, by the time the fine was available, they had achieved compliance.
Councillor Finn.
Sorry, Mary, I don't want to belabor the point, but so if you are a non-compliant landowner, Airbnb or short-term rental provider, you could just enter into a whole bunch of 1 month, like, buy 1 week, get 3 weeks free, like ongoing leases. Like, I'm just trying to understand where the market will head. The market will head in areas around, hey, listen, I read the 3-page report from the deputy CEO. I do appreciate the report. I'm just thinking, like, the idea that we've solved this problem, I think, is not reality. I think the market will absolutely try to find a way around it. We just have to be vigilant around trying to figure out what we all agree on and where we think we'll need to intervene. And sometimes, and I think it's gonna be tough for staff. I do think and it'll be tough we just need to figure out what the next wave of alteration of the leasing scheme will be. There'll be a new scheme guaranteed by the summer. Someone will figure out how to work with it. Anyway, thank you, Mayor.
And just one quick additional note on that, there is an opportunity, obviously, to work regionally and share our experiences with this. Mahone Bay does lead in terms of the restriction of short-term rentals at this time, but as other communities like Lunenburg may catch up in that area, we can certainly work together to try to, stay ahead of those enforcement issues. So right now, we're the only ones who have placed restriction on the operation of Airbnbs, but that's largely a matter of being quick off the mark, not a lack of intention in some other units.
So there's a recommendation, concerning like the.
Yeah, just to accept for information.
I'll make a motion to accept for information.
Any further discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor, signify with aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you very much. We move on to 6.4, post-election policy reviews.
Thank you, Mayor. So in the previous policy and strategy committee meetings in December, we were very focused on what we as a group feel is important coming into the election, which is reestablishing council procedures, bringing committees back to life, all those kind of things that are important after election. But there are a few things that legislation also requires that we do following the election that we haven't done yet. And in particular, that's a review of the expense policy and the audit and finance committee terms of reference. So the recommendation here is that these things be placed on the agenda for the January 27th policy and strategy committee meeting, and that staff would present proposed amendments to the expense policy, which I know Director of Finance actually was working on with our deputy CAO. So that part we have expectation for. There's nothing in the recommendation. We are presenting changes to the audit and finance committee terms of reference. However, there has been some discussion amongst council on that note. So happy to take any questions, the recommendation regarding the agenda that's included.
Any questions? Councillor Wilson?
I'd just like to move the council set the agenda of the January 27th, 25 policy and strategy committee meeting to include a review of the expense policy and audit and finance committee terms of reference with staff to present proposed amendments. To the
Councillor
expense
Carter,
policy.
did you want to second?
Can't wait for that meeting.
Second. Is there any discussion? Questions?
For the 27th.
Councillor Carter?
So my question then is, when will we visit the terms of reference for the audit committee?
Well, so it will be on the agenda. It's just that we're not proposing any change. So if anybody's interested in proposing any change, I would suggest between now and then would be the time to start suggesting it, and then we can have a full discussion at the meeting and either have an outcome for the meeting or we'll act it as soon as we can.
Staff isn't proposing to change.
We're not proposing a change.
But councilors make it.
Well, obviously.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No? You ready for the question? All those in favor, signify. Aye, opposed? The motion is carried, thank you. And we have item 6.5, project volunteer phase 2 and 3.
Thank you. So this is just an update on the previous project volunteer staff report last year. And to be honest, I guess we're, somewhat bystanders in all of this, because as it notes, we don't have the recreation department, and that's where this project is largely taking place. But in the interest of supporting a regional effort in an area that I think most would agree is valuable, there's a recommendation here that we do continue to participate at a relatively nominal cost. And I'm happy to take any questions about this, although to be honest, the information in the package is more than I've been able to.
Councilor Green.
Mayor, I'd move the council direct staff to participate in phases 2 and 3 of the project volunteer project with an unbudgeted cost of $100 for 2024-2025.
For that motion, Councilor Paulson. Any further discussion, questions? Okay, any further question? All those in favor, signify with A. Or opposed, nay.
Mayor, I'd also move the council direct staff to include anticipated project volunteer costs for 2025-2026 in the draft 2025-2026 budget.
There's second for Councilor. Thank you. Questions, discussion? Okay, here comes the question. All those in favor, signify with aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. Council items, 7.1, Mayor Rose Park, remote appointments. I have no notes on that, but I think I'll hand it over to see. Did you have any?
There was an extra person appointed. My
Yes. Well, there are three, and
And then Council Carter is the alternate.
I don't think it was specified, and there are three, right? And we need two.
I'm a member
Yeah.
as mayor. I'm automatically on that, so we're having two others.
Shoots.
I'm not sure.
I believe there was 3 and an alternate appointed.
I
and
believe
it's
I
to
was
be
on it
2.
and I offered to back off with the withdraw
Okay.
to Eric.
Yeah, apologies. I think there was to be circulated a document of the appointments, and I assume that it had been, but I didn't receive it. So there was a nominating committee yesterday and all that stuff's on it.
I think.
Well, this wasn't
that was
discussed at that.
This is
This,
external, so I think it wasn't.
I'm just
circulated.
pulling up the,
It was the internal ones.
I don't think I was circulated even the stuff from yesterday.
Okay. Councilor Carter,
So what is the required membership again? Is it a mayor
the mayor is automatically on it as one member.
plus one other or two others?
They're saying two others and an alternate. Is it two others and an alternative clerk?
2 members and alternate. And
Okay, so just a total of 3, I would say.
that number's not right though.
So that's mayor
Mayor.
plus one makes 2.
2, and an alternate.
Oh, right, because you're not on this list. So we have 3 appointed,
Yes. One
Here.
too many.
1 too many.
So we need to remove one.
We need to remove one.
And you volunteered.
So I guess we'll just make a motion. We got there.
You were a little bit ahead of
That was gonna
us.
be-
That makes me as the alternate.
And then you're the alternate.
So just to be clear, the alternate mayor can be.
I mean, I have a paper.
vote.
You may not vote unless
Suzanne
you
was
are
gonna
filling
send
in
it
for
over.
one.
Exactly.
Okay.
That
Councilor Feeney.
Mayor, in the interest of time, I'd recommend that we, I guess I'd move that we take both of these items, these 2 council items, and we refer them to the strategy and planning meeting, I think on the 28th, with the objective of reviewing the list that was sent out last night, with the extended committee group, plus this, whatever we need to talk about on remote appointments, and make sure that all those appointments can happen on the 30th.
Do we have a seconder? Or,
Yeah.
you'll second it, Councilor Town. CAO,
So I do understand there's a little bit of confusion. My understanding is recommendations had gone out. Maybe in the interest of being able to action them, because we will lose a month's worth of committee meetings, and obviously we'll be short at least one member of council. We could have some relevant discussion in closed session at this meeting, because I know it's difficult to name personal information. We do consider it to be personal information, the names of people who have applied. So if there's some confusion around the recommendations that I understood have been circulated to the nominating committee yesterday, closed session today may provide us with the opportunity to ask these questions without outing anyone's personal information.
yeah, I'm happy with that, Councilman.
And then if that doesn't
Well,
resolve things, you can always make that.
Mayor, I'm
motion
looking
later
at,
this
I'm just
week.
looking at the clock and I'm looking at
Yeah.
I'm looking at the agenda, I'm looking at the rest of the closed meeting session, so.
Yeah.
Fair enough, I'll leave it in your capable hands to administer the meeting's duration, but wouldn't break my heart to be able to leave at noon.
Yeah, then we can always make this motion later and then still punt it if we've run it.
Yeah, we can
Fair
also
enough, fair enough.
from close that,
I like meeting on Tuesdays, but I have fear that my phone is gonna explode here. If I don't.
the clerk.
So maybe both can agree to change that motion to move items 7.1, 7.2 to closed session.
I think we just wait on this item, we just come
Okay.
back to it after the closed meeting.
Okay.
You can just deal with it normally then, or punt it to the next meeting then.
So is that motion just floating and waited in?
No, I can't, I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay, the
Happy
motion
to.
is withdrawn.
Mhm.
So on the matter of
Thank you.
committee appointments, of the council appointments, the council has indicated the wish to appoint Councillor Wilson and Councillor Toronto to the nominating committee, but the nominations committee does not have existing terms of reference. So I would like to move that, staff, well, how would this go? But move that, that refer to the policy and strategy committee. The need for, consider the need for the terms of reference for that committee. And make a recommendation to council. Does that work?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Is there a second for that motion?
Okay, I had a question, can I ask that before?
After the second.
I'll second.
You'll second, Councilor Wilson, okay, now you've made.
No, I just had a question, whether that group is a working group, or does it need to be to the level of a committee, because it works, does it get together once every 4 years, or every 2 years, or when?
2 years,
No.
or should we have?
I guess I'm trying to understand, where is it? Working group to committee, I guess, is the step that I don't understand.
It may also meet at any time that any
Oh, right.
scope is issued
I see,
for
okay.
volunteers, citizen volunteers for the committee.
Got it.
And that can be sort of erratic but ongoing.
I see, okay.
Yeah, I think with the ongoing discussion around possible working groups as a type of committee. It would be worth considering when we discuss this in policy strategy, amending the committee's policy at least just slightly to define. That a working group is a type of committee where the membership is composed of councillors and still has a terms of reference, but with some different expectations. Yeah,
Clear.
since this may not be the only one that serves that kind of all councillors, not an advisory committee, maybe it should be.
Got
defined.
it, okay. This communications could fall into.
Yeah.
The crack or that space, okay, thank
Any
you.
further questions or? Wilson, you're pondering something.
Well, if I'm understanding this correctly, all council item 7 is going to policy and strategy, or going to closed section.
It's just be deferred until after the closing.
Okay, okay, I just want to make sure I know whether or not I'm going to this Thursday thing.
Yeah.
But I guess I am.
I think you are either way.
Me too.
Okay, good. You want to drive the electric car?
Okay, all, ready for the question? All those in favor signify with aye. Okay, opposed, nay? All right, the motion is carried, thank you. We will speak to that later. Oh, let's see, we are now at,
7.3.
7.3. Mine,
We just added it.
So, sorry, Mayor, we just added this, this is,
yes,
this is-
Councillor Kennedy, your motion.
Mayor, with, in consultation with the CIO, I'm going to, consolidate motions 2 and 3, but I do have a few motions that were derived from the requests from the Communities in Bloom group when they came to meet with council before the holiday. As you recall, Val Herder and Amanda and Norbert were here talking about, actually Norbert was here at the same meeting, talking about a different topic, but Amanda was here on behalf of, with Val, talking about some requests to council from the Community in Bloom group. And therefore I'd make the following motions to, in fact, first being that council directs staff to provide links to the town's website, from the town's website to the Community in Bloom's community profile book, the 3-minute Community in Bloom video of hidden gems of Mahone Bay, as well as the Community in Bloom judges evaluation report.
Something by forgetting Mayor. Any questions? Thank you. Okay, seeing none, I will call for the question. All those in favor, signify by aye. Opposed?
And Mayor, second motion to direct staff to facilitate a discussion between the town of Mahone Bay and the Mahone Bay Chamber of Commerce and the Communities in Bloom organization to review the planned and imagined beautification investments and the activities to ensure alignment with Community in Bloom judges' recommendations, as well as to explore options of how the town might collaborate with the Community in Bloom group in the future as they kick off planning for the 2026 CIB program.
There's something for that one.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor, second motion, any further discussion? Oh, Council Buckland.
I'm in favor, of course, but I just wonder where the festivals committee falls into this. It's a large group.
Council Carter.
Well, that's a good question, because the festivals committee is essentially separate from the chamber now. So I don't know how that affects the motion.
Well, I was suggesting that the motion be amended to include the festivals group.
That's a terrific idea. I certainly accept that friendly amendment.
I just want to ask Councilor Carter, who will be sitting at the tourism chamber meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow evening, so is that something you could bring up?
The question about the festivals?
Yeah, including the festivals, or is that request first came from the Communities in Bloom, you sit on that, and you also sit on the tourism chamber. So I'm just wondering, the request came from Community in Bloom for the partnership and to add. I think it's fine, but
It's complicated because both the chamber and the festivals were represented on the Communities in Bloom collaborative group. So highlighting any one of them, then if you're going to do that, you'd have to include all the groups that were represented in the Communities in Bloom.
Sorry to disagree, but since Communities in Bloom is an ad hoc group, I don't think we're under any obligation to even know who the different members are. Like, council has 2 members that otherwise we want to make sure are there, and if Communities in Bloom invites anybody else, we wouldn't even know who those other parties are.
Well, I have to disagree, and festivals is a very significant group in the
Yeah.
town, and I don't think it can be, well, in fact, it's in the front to them, but it's not to be.
Sure, Brian, I don't think anybody was
Yeah.
suggesting that.
No,
I was just saying, we don't need to name anyone other than.
Oh, no,
festivals
no,
in the
okay,
chamber, because we
fair
don't
enough.
know who they are, and we're not obligated.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that the theme of the motion is collaboration and planning for the future for 2026. So I think the committee, the group, the CIB group is very wise to do it, biannually. So give everybody a breather this summer and be ready for prime time in 2026. But I think, I think the motion to include the festivals group is, we'll add them, let's just add it to the invitation list, and anybody who wants to show up, the more the merrier.
okay, great. So we had the motion by Councilor Finn, second by
Deputy Mayor,
Deputy Mayor,
I second it.
okay,
You go with the chain?
Benjamin,
You go with the chain?
Sure, yes, sorry.
okay. So we agree with that. Any other questions?
good.
Okay, calling for the question, all those in favor, signify with aye. Opposed, and nay. The motion is carried. Thank you for that addition, Councilor Faulkner. Good pickup. We are moving on to committee reports. Number 8.1, Social Open Doors Association, the monthly report. You all have received that in your package. Are there any questions to? No, and we'll move on to Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program, the monthly report that was also received, and I will continue to sit on that as the representative of our board, but if there are any motions that need to come for that, I will have to ask someone else to make those on my behalf going forward.
Aye.
Sometimes we do this all as a group.
Oh, okay.
So let's, because these are
Got it.
external reports,
Sounds
and
good.
if they don't require a motion. Which other than to receive and file, we will continue.
Oh, so I'm sorry, but there is a note in there to possibly amplify the connecting with the friendly voice with the toll-free number. It's 7 days a week. I thought it would be good if we could include that in our next newsletter, just
Oh,
to amplify that.
under which one?
In the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program,
Okay.
under the first December highlight, they've asked us.
Oh,
Well,
I
it does-
see
they
there.
please share the
Okay,
number. So I
okay.
was just thinking.
I was looking for,
I don't think I need a
it's the
motion. I'll
red,
just make a
right?
note of it.
Okay, I don't think we need a motion, it's just a note.
yeah.
That would be good to amplify that.
Okay. Thank you. Noted.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
To this to go on agenda. All right, so moving on to 8.3, Policy and Strategy Committee special meeting of December 16th. Everyone, I just lost my agenda, so I'm on screen, so I don't know if
There were a couple of recommendations.
there were some recommendations, so I'll entertain a report to receive and file 8.1 and 8.2. Council Faulkner?
There's discussion, so you may want to make a motion and then I can discuss. If you.
Is that
Yes, sir.
item 8.3
B.
or 8.2? The senior safety?
8.3 B.
Okay, so we first need a motion to receive and file 8.1 and 8.2.
So
Okay, Council Wilson, the seconder. Councilor Carver. No
To accept
further.
for information.
Yeah.
Except for-
I'll accept it, second it to accept for information, although I'm never sure why we need to have that. motion for accept for information.
I don't know, it was done long before I was on council.
It's required all the time.
Fair
So,
enough.
all those in favor signify by aye. Opposed? Okay, now we'll move on to 8.3, Council Faulkner.
8.3 B, right?
8.3 B.
Right, okay. By definition, the matters that can be referred to the planning advisory committee are for land use bylaw, development agreement, subdivision bylaw, and municipal planning strategy. I'm wondering why it's confined to the regulatory end of the spectrum when items such as massive developments to the town like the Edgewood Street project wouldn't be included in that definition and therefore not be referred to the planning advisory committee.
Diego.
Are you pointing to the definition, Brian? Can you just cite the section?
Yes, well, the public, no, I just. I opened this.
Sorry.
Yes, it is the definition, item 1. For the purposes of this policy, the following definition shall apply. Planning documents use the municipal planning strategy, land use bylaw, development agreements, or subdivision bylaw.
So, just to clarify that, so that definition of planning documents is from the Municipal Government Act. And it doesn't restrict the committee from considering things that are referred to by council other than those documents. It just ensures that they are required, regardless of council's preference, to be consulted with respect to those documents. So it's sort of a minimum level established by legislation. If you have a PAC, that PAC must provide recommendations with respect to those documents. And then other matters referred by council. And I think that's down in section 7 and 8 where it's council may refer other items. Or maybe it doesn't say it here, but it says it in the terms of reference.
As long as that's possible.
Yeah, this doesn't prohibit it.
Okay.
And the terms of reference for PAC can then broadly describe, if council's wishes to expand that, what type of matters council may refer to the committee, but that's at council discretion. It's not restricted by this definition.
Okay.
It's section 8, actually.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we go back to the beginning?
To the beginning of 8.3
Yes,
at town council policy.
yes, because there are 2 recommendations there, and I'm looking at a motion.
Yeah, these are from the minutes of the policy. and judgment
Okay.
committee.
That council adopt the amended town council policy.
Second by Council Green. Thank you. And a good discussion. Council.
Yes, I support the motion with the considered proviso that we. Note some housekeeping items to deal with some typos that I circulated this morning. Sorry, I can't help myself. But the other thing I suggested in this, and I'm not sure it needs to be part of the policy, is that when we circulate our council agendas, that we make the distinction between public input and presentations as adding in parentheses, public input, unbooked presentations, pre-booked. In some way, just sort of to ensure that the public understands the distinction, because we've had that discussion, I think, at the council table, what is the difference between? So that was just a suggestion. I'm not sure it needs to be included in this.
No, but
motion.
just consensus around the table, we want to be a practice going forward. Okay, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just remind us if we don't catch it next week.
Kelly?
Can we say scheduled and unscheduled?
Pardon?
I'm just thinking scheduled and
3
unscheduled.
books, minimum.
Okay,
So the ones that we usually get
Mhm.
are the 3 books, and then.
I just want to consider, because there's more to it than that, really.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll look at it. but
We'll
I
look
guess
at
the
it,
thing
I
is to
mean,
find some way to make a note. I mean, I
Yeah, we
just
can definitely
mentioned
find a
that,
way
you know,
to.
They have their names and stuff on the agenda, so it's pretty obvious that we know ahead of time who they are. Maybe it's the public
Minutes.
input that needs to.
A bit more of an
clarification
explanation.
indicating that it's not pre-scheduled.
But that doesn't affect the policy itself.
No.
No.
Which I support.
So are we ready for the question? All those in favor, signify with ayes, opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. And other. We will know other motions. Oh, Councillor Kelly.
Yes, the
Wilson,
council,
sorry.
the council adopt the updated public participation and planning policy. That's a motion.
That's a motion. Second by Deputy Mayor. Any questions, discussion? Okay, ready for the questions? All those in favor, signify with aye. Opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Thank you. And we go on to new business, and I think, not item 9.1, and Council Carter.
Yes, I would like to make a notice of motion, and I thank the mayor for your comments at the beginning of the meeting about the traffic events in the home day this past week, and also acknowledging the fact that there have been 6 murder, violence, deaths when in the past 4 months. So I would like to, and I'm concerned that we understand as a group what a municipal role is in addressing concerns around intimate partner violence and gender-based violence. And so I'm just proposing now that I will make, this is a notice of motion, that I will bring a motion to council at the end of January. Relating to consideration of what we want to do with the municipalities.
Is there a second? Is that motion? Thank you.
Just a notice. of
Oh,
motion.
notice of motion, okay.
After you anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, okay, that's wonderful. And we will take note of that. We look forward to that motion coming forward. As sad as it is, that we need it in this day and age. Clearly, education is really necessary. I think for all of us, and to help us all move forward as a community. So, that concludes the business of town council. Thank you all who have joined us in the gallery. And those of you who are viewing on YouTube from the comfort of your home, or some of you may be in your car, I don't know, but anyway, thank you for joining us. I will call the adjournment of this meeting after.
Well, traditionally, we have an opportunity for people on YouTube.
Oh, right,
There are no questions.
Never moving in camera. we're not using
Yeah,
camera.
yeah.
No questions on YouTube.
And how many people are there?
7.
7, okay.
That's.
And are there any questions from the gallery?
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for joining us.
I.
So we need a motion to go into closed session. We are not.
Very happy to do that.
Are we gonna?
Who would like to?
I move that we go into closed session to discuss items of the Municipal Government Act, as permitted under the Municipal Government Act. Regarding acquisition, sale, use and security, municipal property, contract negotiations, and litigation or potential litigation.
And then we're gonna add the item on council. Do we need to add the? Council?
No, I think that's just fine. We'll resolve that in open session. It's just an opportunity to avoid
Okay.
disclosure of personal.
Okay.
So we need another seconder.
We have a seconder?
To move to closed session.
Okay, okay, the mayor, thank you.
I think
very
everybody
much.
voted on this at some
All
point.
those in favor, signify by.
Okay, I'll let you know when.
The motion carried, we will take.